breaking point. The colony of New Terra had been humanity's pride for 3 generations. Established on a lush world in the outer reaches, it represented everything Earth hoped to become among the stars. Gardens bloomed under twin suns. Children attended schools where they learned alongside young beings from 6 different species. Markets buzzed with traders speaking a dozen languages. Artists from across the galaxy came to study in universities that celebrated creativity without borders. New Terra was proof that humanity belonged in civilized space. Commander Elena Vasquez remembered visiting New Terra 5 years ago. She had walked through the botanical gardens with her niece, a bright 10-year-old girl named Sophia who wanted to be a xenobiologist. Sophia had shown her the hybrid flowers that human and Xanthari scientists had developed together. The child's eyes had sparkled with wonder at the possibilities of cooperation between species. Elena had felt hope that day. Real hope that humanity's violent past could stay buried forever. That hope died on a Tuesday morning when New Terra's communications array stopped transmitting. The silence came without warning. No distress signals, no emergency broadcasts, just empty static where millions of voices should have been. Earth's colonial administration tried every channel, every backup system, every relay station. Nothing. New Terra had simply vanished from the Galactic communication network. Elena stood in the Earth Defense Command Center, watching technicians work frantically at their stations. Admiral Marcus Thompson stood beside her, his weathered face showing no emotion. He had served in the military for 40 years, had been there when humanity first joined the Galactic Council and agreed to limit their weapons, their fleets, their aggressive nature. He had supported that decision. War had nearly destroyed Earth in the centuries before first contact. Joining civilized space meant leaving that darkness behind. But something in his eyes told Elena he had never truly believed the darkness would stay buried. 3 days passed with no word from New Terra. Survey ships were dispatched but would take weeks to reach the colony. The Galactic Council expressed concern and promised to investigate through proper channels. Politicians gave speeches about unity and hope. Behind closed doors, Earth's military leadership prepared for the worst. The emergency beacon arrived on the 4th day. A small pod, badly damaged, carrying 23 survivors in medical stasis. Elena was there when the medical teams revived them. A cargo pilot named James Chen opened his eyes first, his face gaunt from malnutrition and trauma. He tried to speak but couldn't form words. The doctors sedated him, but not before Elena saw the horror in his expression. It was a look she recognized from history documentaries about Earth's darkest wars. The look of someone who had witnessed the unthinkable. Over the next 12 hours, the survivors woke one by one. Each carried the same haunted expression. Among them were 2 teachers, a hydroponics engineer, 5 children ranging from age 6 to 14, and 8 others who had been in deep maintenance tunnels when the attack began. They had escaped through service conduits, fleeing to the colony's emergency shuttle bay, while death reigned from above. The youngest survivor, a girl named Maya, asked for her parents immediately upon waking. The medical staff looked to Elena for guidance. How do you tell a 6-year-old that her parents are dead? That everyone she knew is dead? That her entire world has been erased? Elena sat beside Maya's bed and held her small hand. She didn't lie. She didn't soften the truth. She simply told the child that her parents had loved her very much and had made sure she survived. Maya cried. Elena held her and felt something cold settle into her chest. The survivors had recorded everything on personal devices. The footage was fragmentary, shaky, captured by terrified people trying to document their final moments. Earth's leadership watched it in a secured briefing room. No one spoke as the videos played. The Krellian Dominion's warships had appeared without warning in New Terra's orbit. Their vessels were massive, sleek ships built for intimidation as much as warfare. The Krellians were reptilian beings, 3 meters tall with armored scales and cold calculating eyes. They controlled resource-rich systems across 2 sectors and had a reputation for aggressive expansion. The orbital bombardment began within minutes of their arrival. Energy weapons struck population centers with surgical precision. Residential districts, schools, hospitals. The Krellians weren't trying to conquer New Terra. They were trying to erase it. The footage showed panicked crowds fleeing through streets as buildings exploded around them, parents shielding children with their own bodies, emergency responders rushing toward fires they couldn't possibly extinguish. And through it all, the cold efficiency of orbital weapons reducing a thriving city to rubble. When the bombardment stopped, Krellian ground forces deployed. The footage from this phase was harder to watch. Survivors had emerged from shelters hoping for rescue or at least the chance to surrender. Instead, they found Krellian soldiers moving through the ruins with methodical purpose. The soldiers carried scanners that detected life signs. They would approach shelters, order people out, and execute them. No questions asked. No mercy given. Just systematic extermination. One video showed a group of Xanthari civilians, the same species that had helped develop those hybrid flowers Sophia had loved. They approached Krellian soldiers with their manipulator tentacles raised in a gesture of peace recognized across the galaxy. The soldiers shot them without hesitation. Allies, friends, neighbors who had built lives together on New Terra. None of it mattered. The Krellians killed everyone they found. Elena watched her niece die on camera. Sophia had been with a group of students trying to reach the emergency shelters. A teacher was leading them through a service corridor when Krellian soldiers found them. The teacher, a human man named David Park, stepped in front of the children. He begged for their lives in 3 different languages. The Krellians shot him first, then executed each child one by one. Sophia was third. The camera, dropped by someone running, captured her final moments. She had called for her mother. The briefing room remained silent after the videos ended. Admiral Thompson stood slowly, his face carved from stone. Fleet Admiral Sarah Okonkwo, head of Earth Space Forces, wiped tears from her eyes but said nothing. General Dmitry Volkov, commander of ground forces, stared at the blank screen with an expression Elena couldn't read. Minister of Defense Catherine Wu looked at the assembled military leadership and spoke the words everyone was thinking. 4.8 million people. Gone. Murdered systematically over 72 hours. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session within 24 hours. Earth's delegation, led by Ambassador Catherine Reeves, arrived prepared to demand justice. Catherine was 70 years old, had spent her entire career building bridges between Earth and other species. She believed deeply in the galactic community, in the power of civilization to overcome base instincts. She had negotiated treaties, mediated disputes, and worked tirelessly to show the galaxy that humanity deserved its place among the stars. The council chamber was an architectural marvel, a space station designed to house representatives from species with wildly different environmental needs. Sections with different atmospheres, gravity levels, and light conditions allowed everyone to participate in person. The Krellian delegation occupied a prominent position, their massive forms barely fitting in seats designed for smaller beings. Their ambassador, a scarred veteran named Thork, showed no concern as Catherine presented Earth's case. The evidence was undeniable. Satellite footage from neighboring systems had captured the Krellian fleet's approach and departure. The survivor testimonies were consistent and detailed. The recording showed exactly what had happened. New Terra had been home to a peaceful multicultural community. The Krellians had destroyed it without provocation, without warning, without mercy. 4.8 million murders committed with cold efficiency. Species after species stood to express sympathy. The Xanthari representatives spoke tearfully about their own citizens who had died on New Terra. The Veronian delegates, bird-like beings known for their pacifism, called for immediate sanctions. The Centauri, who generally supported Earth, demanded a formal investigation and criminal trials. For 6 hours, representatives condemned the Krellian actions in the strongest possible terms. It felt like progress. It felt like the galactic community would finally act. Then came the vote on actual consequences. The Krellian Dominion should face economic sanctions, the council president announced. A formal censure would be recorded. A committee would investigate the incident and recommend further actions. Trade restrictions would be discussed. The Krellian military would be asked to provide documentation justifying their actions. Ambassador Thork would be required to issue a formal apology. Catherine Reeves stood in stunned silence as the votes were tallied. Sanctions passed by a narrow margin. The censure passed unanimously, a meaningless symbolic gesture. The investigation committee would take months to form and years to complete. Trade restrictions were postponed pending economic impact studies. No mention of criminal trials. No mention of reparations. No mention of military intervention. The galaxy had condemned genocide with words and responded with paperwork. Thork rose to address the council, his scaled face showing something like amusement. The Krellian Dominion regrets the unfortunate loss of life on New Terra. However, our intelligence indicated significant military buildup in that sector. The colony represented a strategic threat to Krellian interests. Our response, while regrettable, was necessary for our security. We will cooperate with the investigation committee and look forward to proving the legitimacy of our actions. Every word was a lie. Earth's intelligence services had already proven there was no military buildup. New Terra had a small security force equipped with crowd control weapons and emergency response equipment. The colony's defense grid was designed to deflect asteroids and solar radiation, not military assault. The Krellians had manufactured evidence, created false intelligence reports, and the Council was going to let them get away with it because Krellian resources powered half the galaxy's industry. Catherine felt something break inside her. 50 years of diplomatic service, 50 years of believing in the power of law, of civilization, of the galactic community, all of it meaningless. The Council would let genocide stand because challenging the Krellians was economically inconvenient. They would investigate and discuss and form committees while New Terra's dead remained unavenged. While Sophia and millions like her became footnotes in bureaucratic reports. She stepped into the holographic projection field, her image appearing above the council floor where every delegate could see her. Her voice, when she spoke, was quiet but carried throughout the chamber with perfect clarity. The Galactic Council has spoken. Earth has heard your judgment. You have determined that the systematic murder of 4.8 million sentient beings, including citizens from 6 different species, warrants sanctions and an investigation committee. You have accepted the word of the perpetrators that their victims were somehow a threat, despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. The chamber fell silent. Catherine's calm delivery was more unsettling than anger would have been. Ambassador Thork's scales shifted color, a Krellian expression of mild concern. The Centauri representative started to speak, but Catherine continued without pause. Humanity has participated in this council for 250 years. We joined your community with hope that civilization among the stars would be better than what we left behind on Earth. We limited our weapons, reduced our fleets, and trusted that galactic law would protect us as it protects others. We were wrong. Admiral Thompson watched from Earth Defense Command as Catherine's image filled screens across human space. He had been waiting for this moment, hoping it would never come but preparing for it nonetheless. Beside him, Elena Vasquez stood with her hands clenched into fists. The cold thing in her chest had grown since Maya asked about her parents. It had grown watching Sophia die on camera. It had grown listening to the council debate economic impacts while children's bodies cooled in New Terra's ruins. Catherine's next words would change everything. Earth hereby withdraws from the Galactic Council effective immediately. We will no longer participate in a system that values commerce over justice, that allows genocide to go unpunished, because the perpetrators control valuable resources. The Council has made clear that human lives have no real value in your civilization. Very well. We accept your judgment and will respond accordingly. The transmission ended abruptly. No formal farewell, no diplomatic courtesies, just a blank screen where Catherine's image had been. The council chamber erupted in confusion. Species that had ignored humanity for centuries suddenly wanted dialogue. The Centauri ambassador tried to re-establish communication, calling for Earth to reconsider. The council president demanded an explanation. Ambassador Thork settled back in his seat, satisfied that the humans would now complain ineffectively while life continued as normal. On Earth, Admiral Thompson entered authorization codes he had hoped never to use. Across the planet, in facilities buried deep underground and hidden in asteroid bases disguised as mining operations, ancient systems came to life. Weapons that violated every galactic convention began powering up. Ships built in secret over 2 centuries moved into position. Scientists who had spent their careers on theoretical research suddenly found their theories becoming very practical. Humanity had spent 250 years playing civilized. They had followed galactic law, accepted restrictions, and trusted that good behavior would earn them protection. New Terra had proven that trust was misplaced. The galaxy was about to remember something it had never really known. Humanity hadn't forgotten how to wage war. They had simply been waiting to see if civilization was real. Now they had their answer. Elena stood in the command center, watching tactical displays update as military forces deployed. The cold thing in her chest wasn't grief anymore. It was purpose. Sophia wouldn't come back. Maya's parents wouldn't return. 4.8 million people would remain dead. But their deaths would mean something. The galaxy would learn that human lives had value, that human blood had a price, that humanity's restraint had been a choice, not a weakness. Admiral Thompson's voice cut through the command center's controlled chaos. All commands, this is Thompson. Operation Reckoning is now active. Rules of engagement are clear. Military targets only. 0 civilian casualties. We will show them the difference between warfare and murder. We will teach them what justice means when civilization fails. Execute with precision. Make them understand. Across human space, ships that had posed as cargo vessels for decades dropped their disguises. Weapons platforms that looked like communication satellites activated their true functions. Soldiers who had trained in secret prepared for deployment. Earth's response to genocide would be measured, precise, and absolutely devastating. The Krellian Dominion thought they had crushed a weak species. They were about to discover that humanity's greatest weapon wasn't their technology or their numbers. It was their memory. They remembered what they had been. They remembered why they had changed. And they remembered that some things are worth fighting for, worth killing for, worth dying for. New Terra would be avenged. The galaxy would learn to respect human lives or learn to fear human wrath. Either outcome was acceptable. The Reckoning. The first strike came 72 hours after Earth's withdrawal from the Galactic Council. The Krellian Dominion's military command received no warning, no declaration of war, no chance to prepare. Their border defense network simply ceased to exist in a span of 11 minutes. Orbital platforms that had protected Krellian space for a century exploded in silent brilliance. Military shipyards constructing the next generation of warships disintegrated into expanding clouds of debris. Command centers buried deep beneath planetary surfaces collapsed as weapons struck with impossible precision. The Krellians had been expecting human ships. They had mobilized their fleet, positioned their forces, and prepared for conventional warfare. Instead, they faced something their sensors couldn't track until impact. Relativistic projectiles, simple masses of dense metal accelerated to 90% light speed, struck targets before defensive systems could even register the threat. Each impact released energy equivalent to a fusion weapon, but left no radiation signature, no chemical trace, nothing that violated galactic weapons conventions. Just physics applied with devastating efficiency. General Dmitry Volkov watched the operation unfold from Earth Defense Command. Tactical displays showed Krellian military infrastructure disappearing from sensors as strike after strike found their targets. The weapons had been humanity's secret for 2 centuries, built in violation of Council restrictions but justified as theoretical research. Thousands of the projectiles had been positioned throughout Krellian space over decades, hidden in cargo shipments, disguised as industrial equipment, waiting dormant in asteroid fields. Now they launched from concealed platforms, their trajectories calculated with inhuman precision. Not a single civilian structure was targeted. Human intelligence had spent 200 years mapping every Krellian military installation, every command post, every weapons depot. They knew which buildings housed soldiers and which held families. They knew where children went to school and where generals planned campaigns. The strikes hit only military targets with accuracy that left civilian areas completely untouched. It was warfare conducted with surgical precision, demonstrating control that terrified observers more than random destruction would have. The Krellian High Command activated emergency protocols, ordering their fleet to converge on human space and crush this rebellion. 300 capital ships, each massing more than any human vessel, began moving toward Earth's colonies. Admiral Thork, recalled from the Galactic Council to lead military operations, was confident. Humans had surprised them with clever weapons, but the Krellians had numbers, firepower, and 2 centuries of conquest experience. They would find Earth's fleet and destroy it in glorious battle, but Earth's fleet refused to cooperate. Human ships appeared at the edges of Krellian systems, struck supply depots and automated refueling stations, then vanished before Krellian forces could respond. They used tactics refined through millennia of warfare on Earth, hit-and-run strikes that bled enemy resources while avoiding direct confrontation. The Krellians had built their military for conventional warfare, massive fleets meeting in decisive battles where superior numbers guaranteed victory. They had no experience fighting enemies who refused to fight fair. Commander Zrel led a Krellian hunter squadron assigned to track human raiders. His ships were faster than human vessels, his weapons more powerful, his crew experienced veterans of multiple campaigns. For 3 weeks they chased ghosts. Every time they arrived at a raiding location, the humans were gone. Fuel depots burned. Supply convoys were destroyed. Automated defense platforms drifted dead in space. But the human ships responsible had vanished into the void, their stealth systems making them invisible to Krellian sensors. Zrel's crew grew frustrated, then demoralized. They were hunting an enemy they couldn't catch, protecting assets they couldn't defend. Worse, morale across the Krellian military was collapsing for reasons that had nothing to do with military defeats. Something else was happening, something that struck at the heart of Krellian society in ways weapons never could. Every screen in Krellian space, every communication device, every public display, suddenly showed the same images. The footage from New Terra, uncensored, complete, impossible to shut down. Human hackers had taken total control of Krellian civilian networks, and they used that control to broadcast the truth. The systematic execution of civilians, children being shot while begging for mercy, hospitals burning, residential districts reduced to rubble. The methodical, efficient genocide that Krellian military had committed in their name. The Krellian government had told their citizens that New Terra was a military threat, that human expansion endangered Krellian security, that the operation had been a legitimate defensive action. Now every Krellian citizen watched the reality. They saw Krellian soldiers executing unarmed families. They saw children dying in their parents' arms. They saw the Xanthari civilians, longtime Krellian allies, murdered alongside humans. The footage played continuously, impossible to block or filter. In cities across Krellian worlds, citizens gathered in public spaces and watched in horror. Parents saw human children the same age as their own offspring being killed. Workers saw hospitals they had helped build being destroyed. Teachers saw schools burning with students still inside. The cognitive dissonance was overwhelming. How could their military, their government, their society have done this? The protests started within hours. Small gatherings at first, citizens demanding answers from their leaders, then larger demonstrations as the truth spread. The Krellian government tried to suppress the protests, but their security forces were stretched thin, protecting military assets from human raids. The footage kept playing. The protests kept growing. Ambassador Catherine Reeves appeared on every major galactic news network simultaneously. Human intelligence had infiltrated communication systems across civilized space, ensuring her message would reach every species. She stood against a backdrop showing New Terra's ruins, her expression carved from stone. The Galactic Council asked Earth to respond with wisdom and peace. We have responded with justice and precision. Every target we have struck has been military.
Every Krellian civilian is safer today than New Terra's children were 73 days ago. She gestured to screens showing footage of Krellian protests.
The Krellian people are learning what their government did in their name. They are learning that their security was built on the corpses of innocents. They are learning that their leaders lied to them, manipulated them, and committed genocide to serve economic interests. This is psychological warfare, the Centauri ambassador protested during an emergency council session. Humanity is violating the conventions against civilian manipulation. Catherine's smile was cold. We are showing the truth. If truth destabilizes your society, perhaps your society deserves destabilization. The Krellian military knew what they were doing. The Krellian government authorized it. Now the Krellian people will decide if they want leaders who commit genocide. The galactic community watched in growing alarm as humanity demonstrated capabilities no one had suspected. Their military technology was decades ahead of public knowledge. Their intelligence networks had infiltrated every major government. Their ability to conduct precise, devastating warfare without collateral damage showed planning and restraint that contradicted everything the galaxy thought it knew about human nature. Species that had dismissed Earth as emotional and weak now feared what else humanity had hidden. The Krellian High Command faced impossible choices. Their infrastructure was crumbling under constant raids. Their civilians were protesting in millions. Their fleet couldn't catch enemies who refused to engage. They decided on a desperate gambit. If they couldn't defeat human forces in space, they would threaten what humans clearly valued most: civilian lives. Admiral Thork ordered a battle group to Earth's colony of New Geneva, home to 8 million humans and various other species. The implied threat was clear. Stop your attacks or we will do to New Geneva what we did to New Terra. The human response was immediate and overwhelming. A fleet appeared in New Geneva's orbit within hours, far larger than intelligence estimates suggested Earth possessed. Sleek warships bearing weapons that made Krellian vessels look primitive, but they didn't fire. They simply waited, shields active, weapons ready, positioned between the Krellian fleet and the colony. Admiral Sarah Okonkwo's voice transmitted on all frequencies. You want to threaten civilians? Try it, we are here. We are ready. And unlike you, we don't murder the defenseless. The standoff lasted 6 hours. The Krellian battle group had numbers but suddenly doubted their advantage. These human ships were different from the raiders, larger and obviously built for direct combat. Their weapons were powered and targeting systems locked on Krellian vessels. Worse, the Krellian crews knew what had happened to New Terra. They had seen the footage. They understood they were being asked to commit the same crimes their people were protesting back home. When the Krellian commander gave the order to withdraw, half his ships complied immediately. The other half hesitated, then followed. Not a shot was fired. The message was delivered. Humanity would protect its civilians with overwhelming force while conducting military operations with precise restraint. The Krellian Dominion's collapse accelerated over the following weeks. Human forces maintained pressure on military targets while Krellian society fractured under the weight of revealed truth. The protests evolved into political movements demanding accountability. Young Krellians formed peace organizations, rejecting the aggressive expansion that had defined their culture. Military units began refusing orders, unwilling to fight a war their citizens opposed. The government that had ruled with absolute authority for 3 centuries found itself losing control. 90 days after New Terra's destruction, the Krellian High Command surrendered. The terms were non-negotiable. Complete demilitarization, war crimes trials for everyone involved in New Terra's genocide, reparations to survivors, dismantling of the centralized government that had authorized mass murder, occupation by human forces until reforms were implemented and verified. Ambassador Thork tried to negotiate better terms, claiming some honor was due to a defeated enemy. Admiral Thompson's response was delivered publicly. You have no honor. You murdered 4.8 million innocents. You will accept these terms or we will continue operations until there is no Krellian military left to surrender. The Krellians accepted. They had no choice. Their military was shattered, their society divided, their leaders discredited. The empire that had controlled 2 sectors and terrorized smaller species for generations ceased to exist. In its place would come something new, something built on accountability rather than conquest. The tribunal station appeared in orbit above New Terra's ruins 1 month later. A massive structure built from materials transported by human cargo fleets and assembled with remarkable speed. It resembled a courthouse from Earth's history, adapted for space and designed to accommodate multiple species. Admiral Thompson named it the Hall of Justice, ensuring everyone understood its purpose. This was where New Terra's dead would receive their due. The war crimes trials began immediately, broadcast live across every communication network in the galaxy. Judge Maria Santos presided, a woman who had served Earth's highest courts for 40 years and had no patience for excuses or diplomatic niceties. The first defendant was Scale Commander Vrax, who had led ground forces during New Terra's final days. Prosecutor David Chen, who had lost his entire extended family on New Terra, presented evidence with clinical precision. The footage played again, but this time with context and analysis. Military communications showing Vrax had received explicit orders to eliminate all human presence. Survivor testimony describing systematic executions. Technical data proving civilians had attempted to surrender and were murdered anyway. Vrax sat in the defendant's chair, his scales showing colors that indicated stress and fear. His appointed defense attorney, a human lawyer named Robert Kim who specialized in ensuring proper legal procedures, did his job professionally but couldn't counter the mountain of evidence. The trial lasted 5 days. Witnesses testified, evidence was examined, legal arguments were presented and debated. When the verdict came, Judge Santos's voice carried throughout the galaxy. Scale Commander Vrax, this court finds you guilty of genocide, crimes against sentient beings, and murder of civilians in violation of the laws of war. You are sentenced to life imprisonment without possibility of release. You will spend the remainder of your natural life in a facility where you will see New Terra's ruins every morning when you wake. You will remember what you did every day until you die. That is justice. The pattern repeated across hundreds of trials. Each defendant faced individual judgment based on their specific actions. Some had directly participated in executions. Others had authorized the attacks. Still others had provided false intelligence justifying the genocide. All were found guilty based on overwhelming evidence. All received life sentences, ensuring they would live with the consequences of their crimes rather than escape through execution. Ambassador Thork's trial drew the largest audience. As the government official who had authorized the attack and then lied to the council, he represented the political failure that enabled genocide. He maintained arrogance throughout the proceedings, insisting he had acted in Krellian interests, that New Terra had represented a strategic threat requiring elimination. Prosecutor Chen systematically destroyed every claim. Strategic threat? A colony of families, farmers, teachers, children? This was the threat that required total extermination? He displayed the falsified intelligence Thork had presented to the council. You claimed humans were building military installations. The evidence proves these were schools, hospitals, and agricultural facilities. You knew this. You lied to the galaxy because truth would not justify what you had done. When the guilty verdict was read, Thork's scales lost all color. Life imprisonment for someone accustomed to power and privilege would be worse than death. Judge Santos ensured he understood this. You will live a long life, Ambassador. You will spend it remembering the millions you murdered for economic advantage. You will see their faces every day. That is justice. While trials continued, human forces maintained occupation of former Krellian worlds. But it wasn't the brutal occupation many feared. Human administrators worked alongside Krellian civilians to rebuild infrastructure and restore normalcy. Schools reopened with new curricula teaching accurate history. Trade resumed under human oversight. Life slowly returned to normal, but with fundamental changes. A new generation of Krellians learned truth instead of propaganda. They studied New Terra's genocide as a cautionary tale about unchecked military power and government accountability. Teachers supervised by human educators explained the importance of laws protecting civilians even during conflict. Some adult Krellians resisted this education, unable to accept their society's crimes. But younger Krellians, horrified by what their parents' generation had done, embraced change. A movement called the Peace Scales formed. Young Krellians volunteering to help with reconstruction and demanding their government never again commit such atrocities. Some requested permission to visit New Terra's memorial site, where humans were building a monument to the dead. Elena Vasquez, now serving as military governor of the occupation, approved these requests. She met with Peace Scales representatives regularly, seeing in their determination a hope that justice might prevent future genocides. The trials concluded after 6 months. The convicted were transported to a prison facility orbiting New Terra, designed with transparent walls ensuring inmates could always see the world they had destroyed below. Every morning they would wake to that view. Every night they would sleep remembering their crimes. The galaxy received complete records of every trial, every piece of evidence, every verdict. Humanity ensured no one could claim the process had been unjust or motivated by revenge. The Galactic Council held an emergency session to discuss humanity's actions. Many species remained uncomfortable with the demonstration of human military and legal power. Others expressed grudging respect for the thoroughness and restraint shown. The Centauri ambassador stood to address the assembly. Earth has taught the galaxy a difficult lesson. They showed us that true civilization requires enforcement, that justice without consequences is merely theater. They demonstrated that warfare can be conducted with precision and honor. Most importantly, they proved that patience is not weakness and restraint is not surrender. Catherine Reeves returned to the council chamber 6 months after her dramatic departure. She wore civilian clothes, not military uniform, a deliberate choice signaling Earth's preference for peace. But the weapon platforms orbiting Earth and its colonies remained active, a constant reminder of capabilities the galaxy could no longer ignore. She took her seat in the restored Earth delegation area and waited to be recognized. The council president, a different individual now after the previous president resigned in disgrace, acknowledged her with cautious respect. Ambassador Reeves, Earth's return to this council is welcomed. We hope this marks a new era of cooperation. Catherine stood, her voice carrying the same quiet intensity it had during her departure. Earth returns with conditions. We propose the Genocide Prevention Protocol. Any species committing systematic extermination of civilian populations will face immediate military intervention by coalition forces. No debate, no committees, no economic impact studies, just immediate action. She displayed the full proposal, a detailed framework for rapid response to mass atrocities. It included independent monitoring systems, clear definitions of genocide, and automatic triggers for intervention. Most controversially, it gave enforcement authority to a coalition including Earth, the Centauri, and other species willing to actually defend civilians rather than debate while people died. The council erupted in argument. Some species supported the proposal immediately, having seen what happened when genocide went unpunished. Others worried about sovereignty, about the precedent of military intervention, about giving Earth such influence. The debate lasted for weeks, broadcast live as the galaxy wrestled with fundamental questions. What did civilization mean? What responsibilities came with galactic community membership? What price was acceptable to prevent atrocities? The Genocide Prevention Protocol passed with 70% support. Species that voted against it were quietly informed by multiple delegations that they should reconsider. The message was clear. The galaxy had changed. Genocide would no longer be tolerated. Civilians were no longer acceptable targets. And if official channels failed to protect the innocent, Earth had proven it would act alone. Catherine addressed the council after the vote. Humanity spent 250 years trying to be what you wanted us to be. Peaceful, reasonable, willing to accept injustice rather than disturb galactic harmony. New Terra proved that approach failed. We will never make that mistake again. We will remain part of this community, but on our terms. We will follow laws that protect the innocent and ignore laws that enable murder. Most importantly, we will never again trust that civilization means anything without the will to enforce it. She looked at the empty seats where the Krellian delegation once sat. 4.8 million people died because the galaxy valued convenience over justice. Those deaths purchased this change. We will honor them by ensuring no other species suffers the same fate. The galaxy accepted humanity's new position because they had no real choice. Earth had demonstrated military capabilities that made confrontation unthinkable. More importantly, they had shown moral clarity and restraint that earned reluctant respect. They had waged war without committing atrocities, had occupied territory without exploiting civilians, had achieved victory without becoming the monsters they fought. Elena Vasquez stood at New Terra's memorial site, watching construction crews place the final elements. A wall of crystalline material would display the names and faces of all 4.8 million dead. At the center, an eternal flame burned, powered by the same fusion technology that enabled human starships. Sophia's name would be there. Maya's parents would be remembered. The teacher who died protecting his students would never be forgotten. Admiral Thompson joined her, both of them dressed in formal uniforms for the dedication ceremony scheduled for the following day. The memorial was impressive, a testament to lives lost and lessons learned, but it couldn't bring anyone back, couldn't undo the horror, couldn't heal all wounds. Maya approached them, now 9 years old and living with a foster family on Earth. She had requested permission to attend the dedication, to say goodbye to her parents properly. Elena knelt beside the girl who looked so much older than her years. Maya looked at the memorial wall, finding her parents' faces among the millions. "They would be proud of you," Elena said quietly. "They made sure you survived because they loved you more than anything." Maya nodded, tears streaming down her face. The galaxy learned because they died. That matters, right? That their deaths meant something? It matters. Elena confirmed, her own voice thick with emotion. "The galaxy will never forget New Terra. We will make sure of that." The dedication ceremony brought representatives from 40 species. They stood in silence as Judge Santos read names for 6 hours, a small fraction of the total but enough to drive home the scale of loss. The Krellian peace scales sent a delegation carrying flowers native to their world, placing them at the memorial's base while apologizing for crimes they hadn't personally committed, but felt responsible to acknowledge. When the ceremony ended, Catherine Reeves addressed the assembled crowd. New Terra was humanity's pride and became our greatest sorrow. 4.8 million people who trusted that civilization meant something, that galactic law would protect them, that their neighbors would defend them. They were wrong, and they paid with their lives. But their deaths changed the galaxy. Genocide will no longer be tolerated. Mass murder will face immediate consequences. Civilian lives have value that cannot be dismissed for economic convenience. This is New Terra's legacy. This is what they purchased with their blood. She looked at the eternal flame burning bright against the darkening sky. We cannot bring them back, but we can ensure they are remembered. We can build a galaxy where their children's children never face the same fate. We can make civilization mean something real. That is our responsibility. That is our promise. Earth returned to galactic society, but humanity was forever changed. They maintained military forces that made other species nervous, kept weapons that violated the spirit, if not the letter, of galactic conventions, and refused to ever again prioritize diplomatic nicety over justice. They became the enforcement mechanism the galaxy needed, but had never wanted to acknowledge. When smaller species faced aggression from larger neighbors, they knew Earth would respond. When genocide threatened anywhere in civilized space, human fleets moved with deadly purpose. The galaxy learned to respect human patience and fear human resolve. They learned that humanity's peaceful nature was a choice made consciously every day, not a weakness to exploit. They learned that humans would endure insult and tolerate injustice up to a point, but past that point would respond with overwhelming force, applied with surgical precision. Most importantly, they learned that human memory was long. New Terra would never be forgotten. Sophia and millions like her would be remembered, and anyone who thought genocide was acceptable would face the species that had once nearly destroyed itself through warfare and had decided such capabilities should only serve justice. Admiral Thompson retired 2 years after New Terra's destruction. His mission accomplished. On his final day in command, he stood in Earth Defense Command and looked at the memorial wall they had installed there. Every officer entering the facility would see those faces and remember why Earth's military existed. Not for conquest, not for glory, but to ensure that never again would human lives be considered expendable by those who forgot what civilization truly meant. Elena succeeded him as commander of Earth's defense forces. She wore her uniform with pride now, having learned that sometimes peace required the threat of war, that justice demanded the capability for violence, and that civilization survived only when good people were willing to fight for it. She kept Sophia's picture on her desk, a reminder of what had been lost and what must be protected. The galaxy moved forward, changed forever by New Terra's genocide and humanity's response. Peace continued, but it was an honest peace built on mutual respect, rather than convenient ignorance. Species dealt fairly with each other because they knew injustice would bring consequences. Civilians were protected because everyone understood that targeting innocents invited destruction. And humanity stood watch, patient but ready, civilized but remembering what they had been, hoping they would never need to unleash that darkness again, but absolutely certain they would if necessary. That was the lesson of New Terra. That was the price of 4.8 million lives. That was humanity's gift to the galaxy. Justice enforced through strength, civilization protected by those willing to fight for it, and peace maintained by the species that understood war better than anyone else among the stars. The memorial flame burned eternal, a promise kept, a warning delivered, a future secured through blood and remembered in stone.